I came home unannounced after finishing my final mission, only to find my son dying alone in the intensive care unit. Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law was partying with her friends on a yacht off the Gulf Coast. So I froze all the accounts immediately. An hour later, she went crazy when she found out. I'm glad you're here. Stay until the end and tell me which city you're watching my story from. I want to know how far it has reached. I stepped into the Santa Monica International Airport just as the sun was beginning to peek through its golden light streaming through the terminal windows. The old military duffel bag worn at the corners rested at my feet like a faithful travel companion for over 40 years. On my wrist, my father's pocket watch vibrated gently with every move, as if reminding me of the promise I made in my youth to always come home. That promise weighed heavier than ever now. At 61, newly retired after my last mission, I had given my entire life to the U.S. Marine Corps, from hostage rescue operations in Houston to endless days evacuating people during that devastating earthquake. But today, I just wanted to be a mother eager to hug Michael, my son, after so many years. I dragged the bag out of the baggage claim area with the same speed and precision as always. Outside, the morning sun was already beginning to burn. I raised my hand to hail a cab, got in, and told the driver 420 Palm Street, please. I tried to keep my voice steady, but inside emotion was crashing over me like the nearby ocean waves. I pictured Michael opening the door with a radiant smile, us sitting at the table, talking about everything I had missed. In just half an hour, I would be with my son. On the way, the radio played news about the Marines reports I used to listen to daily. Now they meant nothing to me. Yesterday, I had concluded my final mission as strategic advisor for NATO in a counterterrorism operation in South America. A 40-year career from stopping arms smuggling on the border to sleepless nights in the jungle was now behind me like distant memories. I stared silently out the window. The blue ocean stretched out infinitely. The waves sparkled as if trying to pull me back to those days, but my mind was only on Michael and the small house where I had placed so many hopes. The taxi took the familiar coastal highway where the palm trees still swayed just like the day I left. But as it stopped in front of Michael's house, my heart sank. The house was dark, the curtains drawn, not a single light on. I carried my luggage up to the porch, a sharp unease growing inside me. I rang the doorbell. The sound echoed in the silence with no answer. I knocked on the door harder, and then again. Nothing. A strange silence, as if the house had been abandoned. I went down to the yard and looked around. The mailbox was stuffed with letters. Wrinkled flyers were piled up on the walkway as if no one had cleaned in a long time. My heart raced. A dark premonition squeezed my chest. I had sent money punctually to Michael and Victoria, my daughter-in-law, to support the family. I believed everything was fine, that my son was living without any problems. But now, in front of this cold house, I wondered what was going on. Just then, I saw Mrs. Peterson, Michael's neighbor, watering flowers across the street. She had lived here since I was a young woman, always kind, telling stories about the neighborhood kids. I shouted, "Mrs. Peterson." She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. "Valerie." "My goodness, you're back. But haven't you heard?" I hurried across the street, my legs almost trembling as I heard her voice. "Heard what?" "Where's Michael?" I asked, trying to keep my voice from breaking. Mrs. Peterson put the watering can down, her eyes full of compassion. "Michael has been at St. Raphael Hospital for 2 weeks. The ambulance came at midnight. I clearly saw the logo on the vehicle." She paused and continued in a lower tone. "And Victoria, my son told me he saw a post of hers on social media. She's partying on a yacht off the Gulf Coast." I stood frozen, as if the entire world had crumbled beneath my feet. Michael in the hospital. For 2 weeks, and Victoria, my daughter-in-law, whom I trusted to care for my son, was partying on a yacht. I felt the blood drain from my body. My heart pounded with painful thuds. "Do you know where St. Raphael Hospital is?" I asked in a hoarse voice. Mrs. Peterson nodded and gave me directions. Without another thought, I went out to the street and raised my hand to stop another taxi. "To St. Raphael Hospital as fast as you can," I told the driver almost in a commanding tone. Dozens of questions swirled in my mind. What had happened to my son that he needed to be rushed to the hospital? And my daughter-in-law, How could she be celebrating at a lavish party while my son lay sick in a hospital bed? Sitting in the taxi, I felt my heart burn in my chest. I clutched the pocket watch so tightly, my knuckles turned white. Michael. My son. The little boy who used to run after me on the beach, who hugged me every time I came back from my long work trips, was now in a hospital. And I, the mother who had dedicated her life to protecting the country, didn't even know my son needed me. I blamed myself for the months and years of just sending money, believing that was enough for him to have a good life. But now, I just wanted to get to Michael, to see him, to know he was alive, that he was okay. The taxi stopped in front of the entrance to St. Raphael Hospital, and the midday sun blinded me. I paid the driver, dragged my suitcase through the entrance, and tried to control my breathing to keep the threatening panic from overwhelming me. The lobby was crowded, filled with voices, footsteps, and the loudspeaker calling out patient names like chaotic music. I went straight to the reception desk, where a young nurse was reviewing files. "I'm looking for Michael Evans," I said, my voice dry as if each word was a huge effort. The nurse looked up, glanced at me for a moment, and quickly scanned some papers. "He's in intensive care, 5th floor, room 512, she replied in a mechanical tone, as if it were just another routine announcement. I didn't have time to thank her. I just bolted for the elevator. "Please, hold the door," I called out, seeing it was about to close. A middle-aged man extended his hand to stop it and waited for me to get in. In the narrow cabin, the sharp smell of disinfectant hit me, and I had to fight the urge to vomit. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, the ICU hallway stretched out cold and silent, broken only by the constant beeping of medical equipment. I walked quickly, my old military boots making a dry tapping sound on the tiled floor. The door to room 512 was slightly ajar, and a white light seeped out from within, making me hesitate for a second. I pushed it open slowly, as if I was afraid of breaking something fragile. Michael was there in the white bed, surrounded by tubes and machines. His eyes were closed, his face pale, so thin I almost didn't recognize him. The respirator was fitted over his mouth, each breath so weak that I held my own to listen. My heart felt crushed. This wasn't my Michael, not the little boy who ran after me on the beach, nor the man who hugged me tightly every time I came back from a work trip. He was just a shadow, a broken version of my son. A doctor was in the corner of the room with a name tag that read, Dr. Evans. He was checking the monitors on the screen, his gaze focused but cold. He turned to me and asked, "Are you family of the patient?" I nodded, my voice choked. "I'm his mother, Valerie." He gave a slight nod, gesturing toward Michael. "He has terminal stomach cancer. The situation is very serious. If it had been treated sooner, maybe things would have been different." His voice was flat, as if he were talking about any other case, but each word was a knife in my chest. "Cancer terminal." I repeated in a trembling voice, unable to believe what I was hearing. An hour ago, I had imagined hugging him, listening to him tell me about his days without me. I thought I would see him healthy, smiling, not like this, trapped between machines, lifeless. How did this happen? Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked, almost pleading. Dr. Evans shook his head, a flicker of compassion in his eyes. "No one has come to see him since he was admitted. We tried to contact the family, but it wasn't possible." No one came to see him. That sentence hit me right in the chest. Victoria, my daughter-in-law, whom I trusted to care for Michael. Where was she? I remembered Mrs. Peterson's words, the social media posts, the yacht, the parties. Rage burned inside me, but it was drowned out by the pain. I approached the bed and took his cold hand. His skin was thin as paper with blue veins showing through. "Michael, it's Mom," I whispered, holding back tears. "I'm here now, son." Suddenly his lips moved, his eyelids fluttered, and he opened his eyes. They were clouded, but with a familiar spark. "Mom," he murmured, so weak I had to lean in to hear him. "Mom, I love you." Before he could finish, the heart rate monitor let out a long, sharp beep, cutting through the air. I clung to his hand. "Michael, no, son," I screamed, but Dr. Evans pulled me away, calling for the nurses. "Get out, let us work," he ordered firmly. They pushed me out into the hallway. I watched through the window as the nurses rushed in. Machines beeped urgent voices, everything a blur. I covered my face, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please don't take him," I repeated, as if that could hold him back. But a few minutes later, Dr. Evans came out, took off his gloves, and shook his head. "I'm so sorry," he said in a grave voice. "We did everything we could." I felt empty inside. My legs gave out and I stumbled out of the ICU, not daring to look at the white sheet covering his face. Michael was gone just when I had come back. I didn't get to tell him how much I loved him or that I was sorry for leaving him alone. I stood in the hallway under a cold white light, feeling an immense emptiness, as if the whole world had collapsed. I took out my phone, my hands shaking, and dialed Victoria's number. On the other end, there was loud music, laughter, and voices, as if she were in the middle of a party. "What is it?" Victoria answered, her tone sharp, without the slightest bit of interest. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "Michael is dead." There were a few seconds of silence, and then she replied, as if talking about the weather. "Oh, right, I'm busy. We'll talk later." The call disconnected. I stood there motionless. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. Victoria didn't ask anything. She showed no sadness. She was partying while my son had just taken his last breath. I turned and walked toward the hospital exit. Outside, the sun was still shining, but I only felt cold. A cold that chilled me to the bone. I had lost Michael, and now I knew I had also lost faith in the only person I once called family. Victoria, who I thought would take care of my son, had betrayed us in the cruelest way possible. I walked out the door of St. Raphael Hospital. The midday light hit my face, but all I felt was a cold emptiness inside. My legs felt heavy, as if each step was a struggle not to collapse. I don't remember how long I walked, only that I had to get to the administrative office to handle the paperwork for Michael's death certificate. The word death echoed in my head like a hammer, shattering any hope that might have been left. My son, the boy I raised and loved with all my heart, was now just a piece of paper, a stamp, a name in a hospital file. In the administrative office, a young nurse with her hair in a high ponytail handed me a clear plastic bag. "These are Mr. Evans's belongings," she said in a soft but hurried voice routine from a long workday. I took the bag with trembling hands and looked through the plastic. Inside was Michael's watch, the worn leather wallet I gave him for his 20th birthday, and his phone with its scratched screen. I opened the wallet, hoping to find something of his, a trace of the life he had lived. But it was empty, except for his documents and an old photo with creased corners. In the picture, Michael and I were on the beach. He was just a little boy with a radiant smile and a red kite in his hand. I clutched the photo to my chest as if letting it go would make the memories of my son fade away too. I asked the doctor to give me Michael's entire medical history. Another doctor, not Dr. Evans, came in with a thick file. "Here is the complete history," he said, placing the stack of papers on the table. I flipped through the pages: admission dates, lab results, and the final diagnosis: terminal gastric cancer with metastasis. I paused, my vision blurring as I read that line. The doctor beside me lowered his voice. If he had been brought in a few months earlier, he might have lived another year or two. But when he was admitted, his condition was already too severe. I nodded, unable to speak, feeling my chest tighten. 1 or 2 years. If I had been home, if I had paid more attention to him, if I hadn't let Victoria handle everything, would Michael have had a chance? "Who is the primary contact person?" I asked in a hoarse voice. The nurse on duty, who was nearby, checked her notebook and answered, "Victoria Lopez." We called several times, sent messages, but we couldn't reach her. I froze as if I had been slapped. Victoria, the same person I sent money to every month who I trusted to take care of Michael, never showed up. Not only had she abandoned my son, but she didn't even respond when the hospital tried to contact her. I clenched my fists, digging my nails into my palms until I felt a burning sensation. Just then, Michael's phone vibrated inside the plastic bag. The screen lit up with the name Victoria. I stared at that name, my heart pounding a mile a minute. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to ask her how she could be so cruel, but I didn't. I couldn't face her cold voice, not after everything that had happened. I let the phone ring until the screen went dark. Then I put the bag in my purse and left the administrative office. I went to the morgue where they had taken Michael to prepare him for the funeral. The attendant handed me a document asking me to sign it to transfer him to the military funeral home. I took the pen, but my hand was shaking so much that the signature came out as a scribble. "Are you okay?" the man asked, looking at me with concern. I nodded, but I knew I wasn't. How could I be when I had just lost my only son? I finished signing, stood up, and walked out of the morgue, feeling like I was dragging a huge stone with every step. Leaving the hospital, I finally let the tears fall. I stood by the curb, the sun burning my shoulders, but I felt nothing but pain. Pain for Michael, for enduring his last days alone without his mother by his side, without anyone to hold his hand. I blamed myself for the years I spent absorbed in my work on my missions around the world. I thought sending money was enough, that Victoria would take care of him. But I was wrong. The biggest mistake of my life was leaving my son in the hands of someone like her. In the midst of the pain and remorse, the image of Victoria reappeared sharp and cruel. I remembered her sharp voice on the phone, the loud music, the laughter on a yacht. She spent my money, the money I sent to take care of Michael, on luxuries for herself, while my son was fighting for his life. Not only did she abandon him, but she was indifferent when she learned he had died. That cruelty was like a sharp knife cutting me inside, filling me with pain and rage. I wanted to scream, to confront her, to ask her why she treated Michael like that. But I knew it wasn't the time yet. I had to stay calm and do what was best for my son, even though he was no longer here. I took out my phone and dialed the number of Lieutenant Colonel James Ortiz, an old Army friend who now worked at the Military Financial Management Agency. "James, I need to see you. Today," I said firmly, though tears were still streaming down my cheeks. "Valerie, what's wrong? Are you okay?" he asked with concern. "I'll tell you when we meet. Please get me an urgent appointment." James agreed immediately and asked me to come to his office later that afternoon. I hung up, feeling like I had just found a small foothold in the middle of the storm that engulfed me. I took a taxi back to Michael's house at 420 Palm Street. Sitting in the seat, I clutched my father's pocket watch, the one I've carried with me for 40 years. It was the symbol of my promise to come home, but now I knew I had come back too late. In front of Michael's door, I felt the bunch of keys jingle softly in my hand as I searched for the right one. My fingers touched a small cold key, the one I had kept all these years, like a thread that kept me connected to my son. I opened the door and a smell of dampness and staleness hit me, as if the house had been forgotten for a long time. I flipped the switch and the yellowish light illuminated a messy living room. Wine glasses with dried dregs were scattered on the table, dust covered the wood, and empty fast food boxes were piled on the floor. I stood motionless, looking around. This had been Michael's home, the place where I thought my son was living happily with Victoria. But now it was nothing more than a mess, just like my heart at that moment. I dragged my suitcase in, left it by the old sofa, and walked over to Michael's desk in the corner. A brown envelope was lying among some papers. I opened it and felt my heart pound as I went through the bills one by one. One clearly stated yacht rental, Gulf Coast, $15,000, paid with Michael Evans's credit card. The date was from last week, right when Michael was in the ICU. I moved to the next one and my blood boiled. Cartier jewelry, 19, $500 dated 3 days ago. I squeezed the paper so hard my nails dug into my palm. Victoria had used my son's money, the money I sent to care for him, to rent a yacht and buy jewelry while Michael was fighting for his life. I took out my phone, photographed every bill, every number, every date, and saved them carefully in a separate folder. Each click was like a stab in the chest, but I couldn't stop. I needed proof, I needed the truth to confront Victoria. I opened the video call app and dialed her number. The screen lit up, and Victoria appeared standing on the deck of a yacht with the deep blue sea in the background and her friends laughing loudly. She was wearing a silk dress with a huge Chanel logo on the chest, expensive sunglasses, and a cocktail in her hand. That image was like a slap in the face. "What is it?" Victoria asked, her tone distracted as if I were bothering her. I took a deep breath and kept my voice as calm as possible, though I was burning inside. "You know Michael is dead, and you're still so calm." Victoria's face froze for a few seconds. Her lips tightened, and then she shrugged. I know, but he was sick for a long time. There was nothing I could do. Dying was just a matter of time. She said it so smoothly, as if talking about something unimportant, not about the death of her husband, my son. I felt the blood boil in my veins as if my whole body was on fire. Do you think I don't know what the money I sent to take care of Michael was spent on? I said, my voice as cold as ice. Yachts, jewelry parties. I saw it all on the statements, Victoria. She raised an eyebrow and gave a mocking smile. That money is mine, too. We're family, aren't we? That sentence was like the final blow. Family. She dared to call this family after letting Michael die alone in a hospital. I stared at her through the screen and said with a voice of steel, "This is the last party you'll pay for with my money." I hung up the phone without giving Victoria a chance to say anything else. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, but from the rage that burned inside me. I couldn't let her continue. I couldn't let her cruelty go unpunished. I dialed the number of Lieutenant Colonel James Ortiz, an old Army friend who now worked at the Military Financial Management Agency. "James, I need your help," I said as soon as he answered. "Valerie, are you okay? What's going on?" His voice sounded worried, but I didn't have time to explain everything. "I'm coming to your office right now. Please have the documents ready." An hour later, I was sitting in James's office, a small room that smelled of old wood and coffee. I placed a stack of bills on the table, along with the financial power of attorney that Michael had signed for me before my last mission. "Victoria spent Michael's money, the money I sent to care for my son, on these things," I said, pushing the documents towards James. He reviewed them sheet by sheet, frowning. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Freeze Michael's account right now. Cancel all linked credit cards and transfer the remaining balance to my account." James nodded without asking any more questions. He knew me. He knew how I acted when things went too far. In just 20 minutes, he finished all the paperwork. "Done," he said, handing me a receipt. "The account is blocked. The credit cards are canceled, and the balance has been transferred to your name." I nodded, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders, though the pain was still there, sharp and constant. As I left the office, my phone started vibrating nonstop. Victoria was calling over and over. I didn't answer, but text and voice messages started pouring in. First, her voice full of anger. "What the hell did you do to the account? Do you think you have the right to ruin my life?" Then her tone softened, sounding pleading. "Valerie, we can talk. I didn't mean to cause any harm. I needed the money to get by. Please reopen the account." I listened to every message, every word, but I didn't feel a shred of compassion. Victoria didn't apologize for abandoning Michael, nor did she mention my son. She only thought of herself. I clutched my father's pocket watch in my hand. The cold metal reminded me to stay strong. I went outside. The Santa Monica sun was just as bright, but inside me there was a storm. I went back to Michael's house, determined to find more evidence, anything that could unmask Victoria. In my mind, I kept seeing Michael in the hospital bed, his cold hand, and hearing his weak voice. "Mom, I love you." I couldn't let him go in vain. Victoria would have to pay not just for the money, but for the cruelty that stole my son's last days. He could have lived a little longer. I could have hugged him again, heard him speak to me in a stronger voice, not have to receive his body on the same day I left the service, when my heart was still full of hope. I pushed open the door and entered Michael's house, which was now just a cold shell of what it once was. I placed the plastic bag with my son's belongings on the dining table. The dim light illuminated his wristwatch and his old leather wallet, reminding me of the cruel reality. Michael was gone. I pulled out a chair, sat down, and opened the old military laptop I had carried with me all those years of service. The screen lit up, casting a cold blue light on my face. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my mind from sinking into the grief that was screaming inside me. This was no time to break down. I needed to act. I needed to protect what was left of my son. I accessed the military bank account, using the emergency financial authorization Michael had signed for me before I left on my last mission. On the screen, the confirmation of the account freeze order sent by James Ortiz appeared. I checked every detail, making sure there were no loopholes for Victoria to touch Michael's money. I also activated the alerts. Any withdrawal attempt would be immediately notified to my phone. When I finished, I felt a small sense of relief, as if I had just built a steel wall between Victoria and what belonged to my son. Then I went into the bank statements for the last 3 months. The numbers appeared cold and clear, like a silent accusation. A series of lavish expenses: $8,000 for a yacht party off the Gulf Coast, $4,500 for a dinner at a luxury restaurant in Miami, $12,000 at a fashion boutique in Santa Monica. I went through each transaction, and each figure was like a stab to the heart. That money was my sweat and tears. The months I spent risking my life on the battlefield, thinking I was paying for Michael's well-being. But in reality, I was just feeding Victoria's vanity while my son was in the hospital alone, with no one to care for him. I took screenshots of every transaction. I saved them carefully on an external hard drive and on a small USB drive that I always carry with me. Each click was an affirmation. I'm not going to let Victoria get away with this. I will make her pay for every dollar spent, for every day she left Michael alone. But just as I was saving the last file, my phone vibrated. The screen showed the number of a commercial bank. A polite female voice said, "Mrs. Evans, we have received a request to withdraw money from a loan in the joint names of Mrs. Victoria Lopez and Mr. Michael Evans. Do you authorize this?" I gripped the phone and answered with a firm voice, "No, I do not authorize it. Please block the credit file immediately." The employee hesitated for a moment and then confirmed. "All right, we will do it immediately. Do you wish to leave any additional instructions that won't be necessary?" I replied, and hung up. I sat in the living room in silence, listening only to the creak of the ceiling fan. I called Leo, an old friend from the telecommunications sector, who had previously helped me locate devices on secret missions. "Leo, I need you to check a phone number." I said, my voice calm but filled with urgency. "It's Victoria Lopez's. I want to know where she is." Leo agreed without hesitation and called me back just 10 minutes later. "Her phone signal is offshore on the Gulf Coast, probably on a boat. Do you want the coordinates?" I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Send them." "Thanks." It was starting to get dark, and the light coming through the window was turning a soft orange. I locked up Michael's house. I took the keys to his old pickup truck, the one I used to joke was too old for a young guy. I drove to the nearest supermarket and bought water-canned food and 3 new padlocks, the strongest they had. When I got back, I changed all the locks on the front and back doors. With each turn of the screwdriver, I imagined slamming the door on Victoria, blocking any chance for her to continue taking advantage. I placed military-grade tape with a code on each padlock, a habit from my days in the Army, to ensure no one tampered with them. While packing Michael's loose papers into a cardboard box, I found an old notebook with a worn leather cover and a loose string. I opened it, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw Michael's familiar handwriting. Inside was a list of the amounts of money he had given to Victoria, each with a date and his signature. $3,000 March for Victoria to buy medicine. $5,000 April. Victoria said she needed money to repair the house. I flipped through these pages and noticed that many of them coincided with lavish expenses on the bank statements. Victoria not only spent my money, she also deceived Michael, making him believe she was using it to take care of the family. I sank into the chair, the notebook in my hands, feeling like I had just found the last piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just proof, it was my own son's account, a story of betrayal he never got to tell. I ran my hand over the page, and tears rolled down my cheeks. "Michael, I'm sorry," I whispered. "I didn't know what you had to endure." But in the midst of that pain, I felt a new determination. That notebook was a key link, something that would force Victoria to face her guilt. I stood up, put the notebook in the box with the other papers, and looked around the house. Everything still had Michael's touch: the armchair where he liked to read, the small photo of the 2 of us on the shelf, and the smell of old wood from the floor he cleaned every weekend. I couldn't let Victoria come in here to touch what belonged to my son ever again. I clutched my father's pocket watch, which had been with me for so many years, and told myself, "This isn't over, Michael. I'm going to protect you, even though you're gone." The next morning, I took the box with all the papers to the old naval base where they still let me use a small office after I retired. The room was simple, with an old wooden desk, a few metal chairs, and the smell of the sea drifting in through the window. I put the box on the floor, opened it, and started laying out each document on the table. Invoices, bank statements, Michael's notebook. Each paper was a piece of the truth, and I knew I had to organize them carefully to unmask Victoria. I sat down, took a deep breath, and held back the pain rising in my chest. Today was not a day for crying. Today, I needed the precision of a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, not the broken heart of a mother. I began to compare every expense, every line in Michael's notebook, with the movements in the bank statements. Slowly, a pattern emerged, clear and cruel as a sentence. There were amounts that Michael had given to Victoria in cash from the money I sent for medicine or house repairs, but at the same time, Victoria withdrew similar amounts from my son's account. Once Michael wrote $5,000 in May for Victoria to pay hospital expenses, but the bank statement showed that on the same day, $5,000 was withdrawn to pay for a luxury spa in Miami. I gripped the pen in my hand, my nails digging into my palm until it burned. Victoria not only took my money, she also deceived Michael, making him believe she was taking care of the family while only feeding her life of luxury. In particular, I found a series of large transactions made right after Michael was hospitalized. One invoice caught my eye, $10,000 for organizing a birthday party for one of Victoria's friends. With the note yacht party includes DJ and open bar. The date coincided with the day Michael was admitted to intensive care. I stared at that number, feeling my blood boil. While my son was there, weak fighting for every breath, Victoria was partying, laughing, and spending as if nothing was wrong. The pain and rage mixed, making me want to scream, but I held back. I needed proof. I needed everything to be perfect, so she couldn't deny it. I took the military scanner from the corner of the room and scanned every page, invoices, bank statements, and even Michael's handwritten notes in his notebook. I saved 3 copies, one on the base's internal drive, another on an external drive, and another on an encrypted cloud storage service I used for classified documents. Every time I pressed the save button, I felt like I was laying another brick in the wall of justice for Michael. When I finished, I turned to my son's phone, which was still in the plastic bag from the hospital. The message folder was deleted, but I didn't give up. I opened other messaging apps and luckily managed to recover some conversations. In a group chat, Victoria sent a photo of a Louis Vuitton bag with the message, "Just bought this with Michael's money. That guy isn't going to live much longer anyway." I read it over and over, and each word was like a knife in my heart. Victoria wasn't just taking advantage of him. She saw my son's death as an opportunity. I continued to check Michael's email using the password he used for our shared accounts. Luckily, I was able to get in. In the sent folder, I found a reservation email for a cruise sent from Michael's account to an event company. The note left me cold. "Use Valerie's card. She won't be leaving the base for a long time, and if she comes back, she'll have to give notice." I sank into the chair, my head in my hands. Victoria not only took his money, she also planned everything, knowing that I was far away and couldn't supervise anything. She had taken advantage of my absence and Michael's trust to build a life of luxury on my son's pain. That afternoon, I took all the information to James Ortiz's office. "Valerie, what did you find?" he asked me seriously. I put the box on the table and took out the documents and drives. "Here's everything: invoices, bank statements, messages, emails." Victoria took money from Michael's account to spend it even when he was in the hospital. James reviewed some papers and nodded. "This is sufficient and legal to use as financial evidence. Do you want to take it further?" I nodded, my voice firm. "I want her to pay James not just for the money, but for what she did to Michael." He put a hand on my shoulder with a look full of empathy. "I'll guide you on how to present this in court, but you're going to need a good lawyer." Before leaving the base, I called Arthur Reed, a lawyer James recommended, who specialized in cases of family financial abuse. "Mrs. Evans, I can see you tomorrow morning," Arthur said over the phone, his voice deep and confident. "Bring all the evidence, we'll review it carefully." I agreed, feeling like I had finally found an ally in this fight. "Thank you," I replied and hung up. I felt a little lighter, although the pain was still there sharp. That night, I returned to Michael's house and locked the door. The sea wind beat hard against the window, bringing the sound of the waves, but inside me there was a sharp silence. I sat in the living room, placed all the sealed documents on the table. Beside them was my father's pocket watch, the lamplight reflecting off its worn crystal. I stroked it gently and whispered, "Michael, Mom isn't going to let you go in vain." In my mind, every next step was clear. Victoria was wrong to think I would leave her alone. I was ready not just for justice, but for the love of my son, something that no one, not even her, could take away from me. Early in the morning, I walked towards downtown Santa Monica, where Arthur Reed's office was discreetly located among low buildings. The fresh morning air contrasted with the weight in my chest, which carried both the loss of Michael and my anger towards Victoria. With the box of files held tightly under my arm, I pushed the door open. The office was small and tidy, smelling of old paper and ink. On a wooden desk was a neat pile of files, a red pencil, and a steaming cup of coffee. Arthur, a man in his 40s, stood up to greet me. He shook my hand firmly with a sharp gaze that seemed to see through my pain. "Mrs. Evans, please sit down," he said in a deep but warm voice, pointing to the chair in front of his desk. I placed the cardboard box on the table and took out 3 carefully organized folders: bank statements, invoices, receipts, and data from Michael's phone and email. "This is everything I have," I said in a dry voice, trying to stay calm even though my heart ached every time I thought of my son. Arthur nodded, opened the first folder, and quickly glanced through each page. His eyes scanned the figures, the invoices, and Victoria's cruel messages. Occasionally, he would pause, make a note with a red pencil, and murmur, "Illegal transaction." Clear evidence of abandonment. I sat there watching him work, feeling like I was putting a part of my soul into a stranger's hands, hoping he would help me get justice for Michael. He looked up and pushed his glasses up. "Do you have the financial power of attorney? Did you bring it?" I nodded and took the original from my purse with Michael's signature notarized at the military legal office before I left for my last mission. Arthur examined it carefully and nodded with satisfaction. "Good, this is the key for us to control his assets." He continued to review the file. He paused at the yacht rental invoice and Victoria's messages about the Louis Vuitton bag. "Mrs. Evans, I've seen many cases of financial abuse, but this one—" He shook his head, a flash of indignation in his eyes. "She's not just spending money, she's intentionally taking advantage of your son's condition. This is a deliberate act." After almost an hour of reviewing, Arthur closed the files and looked me straight in the eye. "This case has enough weight to take to trial. We're going to request an emergency asset freeze order and the administration of Michael's estate. With what you've given me, I believe the judge will be on our side." I nodded, feeling like I had found a ray of light in the darkness. "She's on a yacht off the Gulf Coast," I added in a low but firm voice. "I have her location thanks to a friend." Arthur smiled coldly, his gaze sharp. "She has no idea how quickly we're going to act. Victoria thinks she can hide at sea forever, but the law doesn't wait." Leaving the office, I felt a small sense of relief, but the pain still clung to me. I passed by the courthouse where the air was thick with the smell of paper and the noise of printers. I filed the request for the court to issue the asset freeze order and submitted the set of copies that Arthur had reviewed. A court clerk, a middle-aged woman with a tired look, received the documents and confirmed. "The hearing will be in the next 72 hours. We will notify you." I nodded, thanked her, and left. The Santa Monica sun was beating down hard, but I only felt cold. Everything I was doing was for Michael, but every step reminded me that he was no longer here. In the afternoon, I went to the military funeral home to complete the arrangements for Michael's burial. The uniform I had ordered for him was ready, a dark blue military uniform, just like the one I wore when I was young. The funeral director, an old veteran, placed his hand on my shoulder. "He will be buried with full honors, Lieutenant Colonel Evans," he said, in a grave and sad voice. I nodded, unable to speak, looking at the uniform folded on the table, the small medal shining under the light. I imagined Michael in that uniform, but the image only made my heart ache more. My son should be alive, smiling by my side. When I returned to Michael's house, it was already getting dark. I opened the door, went inside, and saw a white envelope that had been slipped under the door, lying alone on the floor. I picked it up, opened it, and found a handwritten note in Victoria's handwriting. "Valerie, can we sort this out between us? I need money to pay off debts. Please don't take things this far." I read it again, each word like a slap in the face. She didn't apologize. She didn't mention Michael, not a single word of sorrow. It was all about money, as if my son's death was just a small obstacle in her life of luxury. I folded the letter, placed it in the evidence file, and didn't respond. Victoria didn't deserve a single word from me. On the morning of the trial, I stood in front of the mirror in Michael's house, wearing the navy blue dress uniform I hadn't touched in years. The medals on my chest shone under the light, each one telling a story from my days serving the country. But today, I wasn't wearing it to receive glory. I was wearing it to face Victoria, to demand justice for my son. I fixed my hair, clutched my father's pocket watch in my hand, and walked out. The sea breeze was blowing, bringing the salty air, but inside, I only had a cold determination. The courtroom was large, the white light of the fluorescent bulbs falling on everything, making it look sharp and cold. The smell of old damp wood from the benches filled the room as if time had stood still there. I entered with the file pressed against my chest, Arthur Reed by my side, his gaze sharp but calm. On the other side, Victoria was already seated wearing a tight Gucci dress, her hair carefully curled, and holding the latest iPhone in her hand. She wore heavy makeup with sharp eyeliner, but I could see the falseness in the way she lowered her head, trying to feign exhaustion. Everyone in the room knew she was acting, but she insisted on looking like a victim. The judge, a middle-aged man with a serious face seated high up, asked both parties to present their cases. Arthur stood up, placed the thick file on the table, each section organized like a perfect accusation. "Your Honor, we have clear evidence of financial abuse and abandonment of family responsibilities by Mrs. Victoria Lopez towards her husband, Mr. Michael Evans." He began in a firm voice. He started showing bank statements on the big screen with luxury expenses, yachts, exclusive restaurants, expensive jewelry, then duplicate invoices that proved Victoria withdrew money from Michael's account even when he had already given her cash. Finally, he projected social media photos, Victoria smiling on a yacht, raising a cocktail glass, while Michael was in the ICU just a few miles away. I sat there, watching each image, each one, like a knife in my heart. I remembered Michael's weak voice, "Mom, I love you," and then the long beep of the heart rate monitor. Victoria not only took the money, she also took the last days of my son's life, days he could have lived if he had received proper care. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palm, holding myself back from crying in the courtroom. Victoria's lawyer, a young man in a shiny suit, stood up to respond. "Your Honor, these expenses are a legal right of Mrs. Lopez as the wife of Mr. Evans. Furthermore, Mr. Evans's illness was irreversible. My client cannot be held responsible." His voice was smooth, but I saw how Victoria avoided my gaze while he spoke. She knew the truth, and I knew she couldn't deny it for long. Arthur called a witness, and Dr. Evans, who had treated Michael, entered. He stood before the court, his voice deep but clear. If Mr. Evans had been admitted earlier and received proper care, he could have lived for another 1 to 2 years. But no one contacted us. No one visited him during the 2 weeks he was in the ICU. The courtroom fell silent, and I saw Victoria bow her head, clutching her iPhone, as if to hide her shame. The judge looked at me, signaling for me to speak. I stood up, the military uniform feeling heavy on my shoulders, but giving me strength. I looked straight at Victoria, then at the judge, my voice trembling but firm. I was away protecting the country. I sent money trusting that my son was being cared for, but no one has the right to use my absence to kill my son. When I finished, the room was silent. Only soft breathing could be heard and the sound of the court clerk's pen. Victoria lowered her head even more, but I didn't see a hint of remorse in her eyes. The judge nodded. He reviewed the file one last time before declaring, The court orders the freezing of all assets of Mr. Michael Evans. The provisional administration of the estate is placed in the care of Mrs. Valerie Evans. Mrs. Victoria Lopez is prohibited from accessing the assets and the residence of Mr. Evans until further notice. The sound of the gavel echoed dry and firm like a final end to the hell Victoria had caused. Victoria jumped up, her face red, shouting, "You'll regret this, Valerie! You can't do this to me!" Her shrill voice bounced off the walls, but the court officers quickly approached, asking her to leave the courtroom. I watched as they took her away, her Gucci dress slipping through the door, and for the first time I felt that a little bit of justice had been served. But it didn't ease the pain. Michael wouldn't come back, and Victoria's cruelty remained a scar that would never heal in my heart. I gathered the documents, put them carefully in my briefcase, and left the courtroom. The midday sun in Santa Monica was shining brightly, reflecting off my uniform and making the metals sparkle. But I felt no pride or triumph. I only felt a quiet relief, as if everything I had done had allowed me to fulfill the promise I made to Michael, even though he was no longer here to see it. When the trial ended, I knew I had no time to rest or let the pain consume me. Michael was gone, but I had to do something to keep his legacy alive, so that what he suffered would not be in vain. I drove straight to the bank, carrying the court order. At the counter, I finished the paperwork to gain full control of Michael's assets. The bank employee, a middle-aged woman with a kind look, reviewed the documents and said, "Mrs. Evans, everything has been transferred to your name. How would you like to manage this money?" I took a deep breath, my voice firm. "I want to split it in two. One part to my personal account, the other to create a fund." I called the fund the Michael Fund, a nonprofit organization registered with the state that same week. The idea came to me when I was in the morgue looking at Michael's suit ready for the funeral. I wanted my son's name to become a symbol of hope of life for those fighting the disease that Michael couldn't overcome. I contacted St. Raphael Hospital and other medical centers, asking for a list of cancer patients who had been abandoned or couldn't afford medical expenses. A doctor from St. Raphael who had cared for Michael took my hand and said, "You're doing something very valuable, Mrs. Evans. I'll help you in any way I can." In the first week alone, the Michael Fund covered the cost of medication for 12 patients. I also signed a long-term contract with a mobile clinic to bring medical services to remote areas of the country where people like Michael had been forgotten. One morning, I drove to the Arizona Provincial Hospital a few hours from Santa Monica to review the list of patients the fund was supporting. The air in the hospital was suffocating. The smell of disinfectant and the familiar sound of machines tightened my heart, reminding me of Michael's last days. As I entered the oncology ward, I saw a little boy huddled on the bed clutching a worn-out teddy bear, his big eyes staring out the window. He looked about 8 years old, thin, with pale skin from chemotherapy. The doctor introduced me. "This is Liam. He lost his parents in a car accident. He has leukemia and lives alone in this room." I approached, sat beside the bed, and smiled gently. "Hi, Liam. I'm Valerie. What are you doing?" The boy looked up and said in a small voice, "I don't want to die alone. I want to have a family." Liam's words were like a knife straight to the heart. His eyes, clear but full of sadness, were just like Michael's when he was little, when he would hug me and ask when I would come home. I took his hand, so small and cold, and said, "You're not alone. I'm here." The doctor mentioned that Liam had a chance of recovery if he received continuous treatment and proper care. Without hesitation, I decided to use the Michael Fund to cover all his medical expenses and hire a private nurse to take good care of him. A few weeks later, I returned to the hospital carrying a bag of fresh oranges and a children's book I thought he would like. Liam was better, although he had lost almost all his hair from chemotherapy. His eyes shone, and for the first time, I saw him smile, an innocent smile that warmed my soul. I sat next to him and told him about the days I used to row on the coast, about the big waves and the fiery sunsets. Liam listened intently, stroking his teddy bear. "Mrs. Valerie, were you ever scared on the sea?" he asked with curiosity. I smiled and stroked his head. "Of course I was. But I learned that no matter how big the waves are, if you hold the oar tight, you'll always reach the other side." Every time I visited, I brought his favorite food, homemade flan mango juice or chocolate chip cookies. I would sit beside him, help him eat spoonful by spoonful, wiping his mouth when he got messy. Those moments made me feel like I was taking care of Michael again, as if I was getting back what I couldn't give him before. Liam started to open up more, telling me his dream of becoming an astronaut and traveling to Mars. "I want to see the whole world from above," he would say, his eyes shining. I would nod with tears, wanting to escape, but I held them back and just smiled. "You're going to make it, Liam. I believe in you." One afternoon, as I was getting ready to leave the hospital, Liam took my hand with a hesitant look. "Mrs. Valerie, can you be my grandma?" The boy's question left me paralyzed, as if the whole world had stopped in that instant. I looked into Liam's clear eyes, saw Michael's reflection, and felt my heart heal a little. I moved closer, hugged him tightly, and tears rolled down my cheeks. "Of course I will, Liam. I'll be your grandma." The boy hugged me tightly, the teddy bear squashed between us, and I could feel the warmth radiating from his fragile body. That same day, I began the legal adoption process. I contacted the Department of Social Services, prepared the documents, and set up a small room in Michael's house for Liam. I painted the walls navy blue, the color Liam said he liked because it looks like the sky. I bought a single bed, a small table, and placed his teddy bear on the pillow. Every step of the preparation was a promise to myself. I would not let Liam be alone like I unintentionally left Michael. The Michael Fund was not just my son's legacy. It was now also the bridge that led me to Liam, a boy who brought light to my darkest days. 6 months after the trial, I received a call from the doctor at the Arizona Provincial Hospital. "Mrs. Evans, I have good news," he said enthusiastically on the other end of the line. "Liam has responded well to the treatment. The latest tests show that there are no more cancer cells." I stood frozen in the kitchen, clutching the phone tightly as tears streamed down my cheeks. Liam, the boy I met in the cold hospital room, now had a chance to live. "Thank you, doctor," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I'm on my way right now." I hurried to get everything ready and brought a small gift bag with me, a blue wool hat I had knitted for Liam, hoping he would like it. The day Liam left the hospital, I drove Michael's old pickup truck to Arizona. The boy was at the entrance, thin, but with bright eyes, hugging his worn-out teddy bear. When he saw me, he ran towards me with a smile as radiant as the sun. "Grandma!" he shouted, throwing himself into my arms. I hugged him tightly, feeling the warmth of his small body, and in that moment, I saw Michael's shadow. "Let's go, grandson," I said, stroking his head. "Let's go home." We got into the truck. The sound of the Pacific Ocean came from afar, and the familiar salty smell wafted in through the window. Michael's house had now become our home. The first dinner at home was simple, but warm. I cooked tacos. Liam's favorite dish with ground beef and homemade tomato salsa. Liam carefully placed his teddy bear next to Michael's picture frame on the shelf. Then he looked at me shyly and asked, "Do you think Uncle Michael would have liked me?" I smiled and put my hand on his shoulder. "Of course he would have, Liam. Uncle Michael would be very proud of you." The boy nodded, his eyes shining, and went back to the table to take a big bite of his taco, laughing when the salsa got on his chin. I wiped his mouth, feeling a small but real joy, as if I were reliving the days with Michael. In the following weeks, I started changing the house to truly make it a home for Liam and me. I painted the living room a sand color, a warm tone that I thought would bring freshness. On the terrace, I planted bougainvillea, whose red flowers swayed in the sea breeze. In the backyard, I put up a new hammock where Liam liked to lie down and read or watch the sunset. Michael's things, books, clothes, some photos I stored carefully in a wooden wardrobe, not to forget them, but to protect the memory of my son intact. Every time I opened the wardrobe, I would touch his favorite jacket and whisper, "You're still here, right?" I continued to run the Michael Fund, expanding its activities to rural communities in Appalachia. The fund has helped dozens of cancer patients receive early treatment. People who I know without that help might have met the same fate as Michael. Liam often sits next to me at the table, doing his homework or drawing. He drew me in a military uniform, standing next to him with the deep blue Pacific behind us. "This is you and me, Grandma," Liam said, handing me the drawing, his eyes shining with pride. I hugged him, feeling my heart slowly heal in moments like these. Once a month, I take Liam to participate in the Michael Fund's volunteer group, taking medicine and food to distant communities. Liam fit in quickly, running around with other kids and handing out gifts with a radiant smile. "Grandma Valerie, can I bring more candy next time?" he asked, holding a packet of cookies he had just delivered. "Of course, but you have to ask Grandma's permission first," I replied, winking at him. Seeing him laugh and play, I felt a part of Michael come back to life, as if my son were watching us and smiling from somewhere. I started joining the senior kayak club at the Santa Monica Pier. Every early morning, I would paddle over small waves, feeling the cool water on my hands, remembering the days of training at sea. But now I paddled for pleasure, for the peace I thought I would never find again. Sometimes Liam would sit on the shore, waving at me and shouting, "Paddle faster, Grandma! A fish is chasing you!" I would laugh out loud, feeling my heart grow lighter each day. Every afternoon, Liam and I would go to the small garden behind the house. He planted tomatoes and I grew herbs. The first season we harvested a full basket, and that night Liam helped me cook pasta with fresh tomato sauce. "This is yummier than tacos, Grandma," he exclaimed with his mouth full of sauce. I smiled, stroking his head, feeling a simple happiness I never thought I would feel again. From time to time, the lawyer Arthur would call to let me know that Victoria was still trying to sue or claim assets. "She just filed another request, but the judge rejected it," Arthur said in a calm voice. "Don't worry, everything is under control." I would nod on the phone without responding to any of Victoria's messages. She was no longer a part of my life, and I didn't want to waste a second thinking about her. One morning, Liam came running home from school with a best student diploma in his hand and a smile as bright as the sun. "Grandma Valerie, I got the highest grade in the class," he told me, jumping around the garden. I was sitting in my usual wooden chair, holding my father's pocket watch, the light reflecting off the worn crystal. "Very good, Liam," I said, hugging him. Watching him run and laugh, his innocent laughter mixing with the sound of the waves, I knew that Michael was still here in every beat of this new life I am protecting. That same day, I hung a new photo on the wall right next to the one I have with Michael, Liam, and I on the shore of the Pacific, in the same place where Michael used to play as a child. I stuck a note next to it that said, "Michael is always with us." I stepped back, looked at the two photos, and for the first time in many years, I felt that I had truly come home. Not to a house made only of brick and wood, but to a home of love, of hope, the one that Liam and I are building together, and where Michael will live forever in our hearts. The story we tell is fictional, but it is based on some real events. The names and places have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to think. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I'm genuinely curious. If it were you in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to remain silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all, to reclaim your voice? I want to know what you think, because every story is a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I leave you two of the channel's most beloved stories. I assure you they will surprise you. Thank you for staying until the end.